we're going to move forward because we do have a schedule.
Yeah.
And we're going to move to the bright minds that they helped foster, who now have taken what they've learned and turned it into their own version of it. So please welcome David Barter from Data Services, Ari Bookbinder from Data Services as well, Sydney Cooling Sturgis from Education, and of course we have, oh, this slide shows off. Shabbat Singh from Data Services as well, who's been the most awarded one here.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
I think we might just be waiting to get everyone spotlighted here so that everyone can
No
see.
problem. How was listening to the faculty panel? What did you guys think about it?
I think that everyone's really positive, incredibly positive about the way that things are going, which is super nice to see from the professors. It's also incredibly reassuring to hear them talk about how they have been kind of just as nervous and stressed out as us. I think that that's probably unique to thesis. Like any thesis year is a little bit stressed out. So hearing that the profs were feeling the same way is reassuring.
Well, let's start off with the good old question. What are your guys' thoughts on the themes that came out of thesis this year?
I can comment on that.
Go for it.
I can speak to my section, and I assume this might have been the case in other sections as well. But a lot of the themes coming out, especially toward the later quarter of thesis, were about existentialism and about digital existence and about how we exist when we're not able to interact with other people around us. And I think a lot of us learned that we had been defining and identifying ourselves based on our reflections and our familiar environment, and that environment had changed. So I can, my thesis and a lot of my peers' thesis, we were asking some questions that might sound obvious, like, who am I? And have I ever met myself? So I thank Alex and Bernard for pushing us to ask those questions and creating a comfortable environment for questioning these obvious truths.
Yeah, I think a lot of like the new themes that emerged too were like something interesting was like because we're in new environments, and these new environments are digital. So a lot of our tools that we have are a lot different than our regular everyday tools. So like those kind of like open like a new like world of like possibilities that we can that we're allowed to create. So it's kind of like the pandemic has basically opened like new doors, but kind of closed others. So this transition period is kind of like interesting.
I just wanted to jump in and just say, I think what was so interesting about the categories that came out of thesis is, so last year's graduating class also was afflicted by the pandemic and had their grad show online, even though the thesis wasn't fully online. And from their categories to our categories this year, I think it's interesting the addition of connectivity and education. I think it makes sense because throughout the pandemic, one thing that we are all constantly craving and realize that we maybe took for granted before the pandemic is connectivity, of course, and just connecting with others. And then to the point of education, I think that at least for me personally, it felt like the one thing that was consistent throughout the pandemic that I could always rely on. It was like, okay, is there going to be another lockdown? When are regulations and restrictions going to change? Doesn't matter because I know that I have class on Thursday. And it was nice just seeing the same faces each week. It gave me some normalcy.
David, you asked? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'll put out there as well. Like, this is not necessarily like directly tied or coming from the onset of the pandemic, but certainly could be seen as exacerbated by the pandemic. But when I look at the categories and the projects that came out this year, one thing that I took away from it is just not only the incredible abundance of information in our society now, but the need and incentive to put the information into comprehensible forms that help people in different ways, and how important that has become, and as sort of created this need for a designerly response to, because that's part of what we are so good at as designers, to putting all this information in forms that are useful to people, to everyone, to the average person, not just to specialists or experts or people who know what they're doing when it comes to data and information. So I think that alone explains probably 4 out of the 5 categories being there. It's because what do you need information for? First and foremost, you need to know yourself, hence well-being, hence connectivity, and data services kind of speaks for itself, I think. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking about when I think about where we're at right now. It's like it's all about information and getting it into the right hands in the right form to be helpful and be understood.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We wanted to also ask, like, how has your lifestyle changed when it comes to the pandemic? How have you adapted to the situation? And were there any specific things that you went into thinking when you were going into your thesis?
Yeah, I guess to get things started, like it's like, I guess, like, again, speaking about like virtual environments and like basically not being able to like be around your peers and kind of get that basically collaborating. We were able to get some kind of collaboration going on in class, which was like super amazing, but like it's not the same thing as kind of being in person and kind of having an open format. So the type of feedback that we were getting with I've kind of like opened up to kind of like we're getting feedback from like non-designer minds and the people kind of like around us and our families and friends and stuff like that, to getting like new types of feedback. So like this new kind of connection that we have with the rest of the world is kind of like really beneficial in a way to like, or like a changed kind of approach to kind of like how we design.
I can add to that. I think actually the thesis was actually so important to my lifestyle during these changing times, because all the progress that I had been building prior to the thesis had kind of been like a deck of, a house of cards that just kind of blew away in the wind. And the thesis gave us something that not a lot of people can say they had, which is something to build and something to dedicate their time to. So if it hadn't been for the thesis and maybe my family and my girlfriend, I don't know what I would have done these years. I would be a totally different person today.
Sydney, David, do you want to add?
I can go. I think just in terms of setting up my environment, it's interesting. I think that everyone, not just me, but definitely me, I feel like I became a researcher, that I became this researcher of my environment. I was sort of trying to set up as familiar of a place as possible, just at home. So kind of, having books set up that sort of would be the kind of thing that I could get at OCAD's library for my thesis. And at the same time, always having to look up, like, what is going on in the world right now, especially there's just like this kind of, you're always being bombarded with new information. And I think at first it was overwhelming, but I think that's how my environment changed a lot. It was almost my digital environment. And then I guess my feelings toward it sort of became almost nice. I don't know. I started liking kind of like looking things up, and you'd have a problem and it would be like, oh, okay, cool. Like another problem, no problem. you just bounce right back. And I think I feel most people have gotten to that point, which is really cool.
David, do you want to add?
Sure. I think that, again, looking at the situation we were facing in thesis, I mean, we rely on each other so much, and it's very, very, it's kind of ironic. I found that, you would think that when everything is online and we have such ready access to one another to start up a conversation and say hello and things like that, you'd think there would be more collaboration, if not having to be in the same physical space, but I find that a big time effect of the pandemic on everyone was just there was a lot more hesitation to sort of shrink into your own space and your own mind, I think. And as somebody who, like, I really took it upon myself to reach out to my peers a lot and get those conversations going, mostly because I just love to talk about other people's projects and see the ideas that are being thrown back and forth. But it's not always easy for everybody, depending on what they're dealing with, to be able to participate in that sort of thing. So I found myself asking a lot of the time, just like, how far is too far when it comes to pushing people to engage with me, and things like that. So it was a really interesting experience from that point of view, because I kind of took for granted how easy it would be to find people and get together and have great conversations and things like that. And I mean, we still had a lot, so it wasn't really all that disappointing from that point of view, but it really raised a lot of interesting challenges, I think.
If I can actually add to that, Angelica actually brought up a really interesting question that I wouldn't have thought in general. What is one thing that you missed during thesis and the pandemic? Was there anything you actually missed anyways? Like from thesis in the pandemic?
The community, I think. Go
Oh,
ahead,
okay.
please.
No, I was gonna ask Vermont as well, because then we're both also thesis students. So I think we should also say something about it too, because we also have our own perspective.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, for me, the biggest thing with thesis and things of that sort is OCAD provides one, like Aria mentioned, access to community, but also the other biggest thing for me is access to supplies and access to shops and things of that sort. And a lot of like, though I'm happy that my project had been scaled down to things that I can work with and I can do, which ended up making it more accessible for people in the long run. In the short run, it was really, really frustrating because I'd be all like, oh, I could go talk to this person at OCAD. Oh, wait, I can't just go to OCAD and talk to this person. Oh, I don't really know how to find their contact details. Oh, okay, I guess I'm going to ditch that idea for now. There was a lot of, or like, just like, for me, I find like wood shop and metal shop, like the sounds of it very like stress easing, which might sound weird. But I found myself just playing YouTube videos of people in the shop just to like make me feel better about the fact that I can't go in the shop. So that was definitely something that I missed, is like that physical aspect.
The random encounters, the people you meet that you would never have otherwise met, the communal spaces that foster those kinds of occurrences, for sure. Number one for me.
Yeah, just to comment, like one thing that's really taught to us throughout, like especially like our first few years at OCAD, is kind of like the kind of design through play, and kind of like that's kind of like best experience like at the campus with our peers, and like that's kind of like where we've kind of formulated design strategies, but like the ideas kind of come to us when we're living our everyday lives and interacting with the people around us to kind of find that inspiration. So that was a little kind of challenging, I guess, designing like on your own. I guess like you don't really have that kind of like feedback that's kind of like always there.
I was just going to agree with what David was saying. I especially miss the random encounters, definitely. And I think that things like that ultimately strengthen your thesis, right? Getting to come up to people and give them this kind of 30-second spiel, and there's really not the kind of continuity that your peers have had. And I think that it gives you an opportunity to kind of investigate maybe your biases or understand better what is missing from your thesis. You spend so much time focusing on your thesis and researching it, and you know all these ins and outs, that sometimes something so major could be looking you straight in the face and you just totally miss it. Whereas at OCAD, when you're with a bunch of other creative people, but not necessarily in your discipline, I always loved that aspect, especially because I worked as a student monitor at OCAD. You could just kind of pitch your idea to like a drawing and painting student and then get this sort of feedback that you never would have thought of, and it ultimately just enhances your work. And I really did miss that.
I think something else that fairly specific that we're all missing right now is just genuine eye contact. If you pay attention, you'll notice we're all actually looking slightly down and to the left, maybe to the right. And I read an article recently, I think my girlfriend sent it to me, that we're all hungry for eye contact and hungry for skin contact. And there's actual psychological ways that plays into our emotions and the decisions we're making. And I'm really impressed that Sydney's been looking at the camera as she's been speaking. So that's a great example of how that could be mitigated.
I took a public speaking class this term, actually.
There you go.
It's interesting. You look at the camera, and because I'm looking at the camera, we're making eye contact. You look at me and we're making eye contact. I'm not seeing you guys. I'm looking at the camera. It's a bit weird. So
you know, it's crazy.
Something we need to investigate.
It's crazy because now when I see somebody like Sydney who's looking directly at the camera right now, to me it's like shocking and slightly overwhelming in a good way. But it's like, wow, I haven't had that in a long time. So yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so one kind of like, let's round out with a very big, heavy question. As students, having like, at this point, we're finishing it off. Where do you think design's going?
So I guess just like looking at everybody's like amazing projects and everything is kind of like the two biggest themes that kind of got on it was just like connectivity and connectivity between like yourself and the world around you. And it's kind of like being approached by like kind of like wellness products that have to deal with either your physical health or mental health. And being connected to the world around you is kind of being like it's kind of like how can our technology like kind of connect us? We have new tools like CGI and like blockchain and like things like that. So like just like the new types of like applications that we can develop, right? I think we're gonna see like a lot of like it's basically the tokenization of everything when and it's also it's gonna come to a lot of like what it really matters to like your personal self and like wellness. So someone wants to continue off that.
Yeah, I think me and Shapad both had projects that were focused on like NFT and blockchain as a material for design. And we could say data as a material for design, machine learning as a material for design. But I think really what we're talking about is, and something that is stressed in my thesis section, especially, was the future as a material for design. Especially right now, when every other day the future is changing and we don't know what it's going to look like. It's like we realize we have to actually design it. We can't just wait for it. It's not passive anymore.
Go ahead.
I suppose I'll show my own bias a little bit here and say that, like, in terms of where I see design going, I think a lot of it is all about inclusivity to me. The one thing that we need to also acknowledge, of course, in addition to the pandemic, is what we've seen happen socially and culturally outside. And more we're coming into greater recognition of the diverse perspectives and needs of others, and how to and the need to design from so many different perspectives, like rather than making sure that specific needs are met and things like that. And when we dive deeper into this age of data as a material for design and information being everywhere, recognizing the form it takes and how helpful that is to every group that could potentially benefit from it, and what kind of potential power dynamics are occurring because we're not thinking enough about everyone's specific needs, rather than thinking of humanity as just a monolith of, oh, we all need these things, we all need this and this and this and this, and it all needs to look like this. Is super important, and that's something that I think I addressed with my thesis, and I'm going to continue addressing it in my master's.
Amazing. Sydney, would you like to close us off?
Yeah, I mean, I always am echoing what David says. David always says the exact thing that I'm thinking, even when we were preparing for the grad show website. I think just in short, the future of design, I think, is very bright. As an industry, I think that we are in a fantastic position. I feel like even when we started the program, talking to other folks that know nothing about it, about the value of designing for others and being inclusive and challenging your biases, sometimes you get that kind of head look, that kind of like, that's like a degree, that's like do we need that? Whereas now it's totally the opposite. It's whoa, we need that and we need it yesterday. Like, let's hire a designer for our business right now. So I think I do think the future of design is bright. I think the future is bright. And yeah, I think that about rounds us up maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone so much for being here with us today and to talk about your perspectives.
Thanks for having us.